I knew the moment I stepped through those glass doors that I wasn't supposed to be there. My wife looked up from across the room, and for half a second, the smile on her face froze, just enough to tell me everything. Before we get into what happened next, take a moment. Like this video if you've ever followed a gut feeling you couldn't explain. Subscribe if you believe real marriages have uncomfortable moments. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed or walked away? My name is Mark. I'm 36, married for 8 years, and lately my life has felt smaller than it used to. We live in a modest apartment near the highway, constant traffic noise, thin walls, neighbors who come and go. I work maintenance at a hospital. Long shifts, decent work, barely enough money. My wife, Sarah, recently got promoted into a corporate role that came with new dinners, new coworkers, and a world I wasn't part of. I told myself it didn't bother me, but it did. Mentally, I was exhausted, always calculating bills, always feeling behind. Socially, I felt invisible. At home, conversations became rushed, practical, distant. So when she mentioned a work dinner and said spouses weren't invited, something twisted in my chest. Not anger, not jealousy, just a quiet fear that I was slowly being left behind. And that fear is what brought me there that night. Uninvited, uncertain, already bracing for something I couldn't name yet. I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes before going inside, watching people in suits laugh as they walked toward the restaurant entrance. I felt underdressed, underqualified, like I'd wandered into the wrong life. The engine ticked as it cooled, and my hand stayed tight on the steering wheel. You're just saying hello, I told myself. You're her husband. That should mean something. Inside, everything smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. I spotted Sarah near a long table, glass of wine in hand, laughing at something her boss said. I stood there too long, unsure where to put my body, my eyes, my face. When she finally noticed me, her expression shifted, surprise first, then something like worry. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly when she came over. Not angry, not happy, just tense. I was nearby, I lied. My voice sounded thin even to me. People stared. Or maybe I imagined it. Either way, my chest tightened. I shook hands with coworkers who didn't know what to make of me. One guy asked where I worked. When I told him, he nodded politely and turned away mid-sentence. I felt every difference between us in that room. Money, confidence, belonging. Sarah introduced me quickly, then drifted back to her table. I stood alone near the bar, wondering why I thought showing up would make me feel closer instead of smaller. The drive home was quiet in the worst way. Sarah didn't say much, just stared out the window while the city lights streaked past. I wanted to explain myself, but every explanation sounded like an excuse. Or a confession. At home, she finally spoke. "You embarrassed me," she said. Not yelling, just tired. That hurt more than anger would have. I tried to tell her I felt disconnected, that I didn't recognize the world she was stepping into. The words came out clumsy, defensive. "I just wanted to feel included," I said. She sighed and rubbed her temples. "You could have trusted me." That word, trusted, sat heavy in the room. Because I wanted to. I really did. But trust feels fragile when your own life feels unstable. When your paycheck barely stretches. When your partner starts coming home later, talking about people you'll never meet. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, the space between us loud and cold. I replayed the dinner over and over, her smile, the way I didn't fit, the looks I imagined from strangers. At work the next day, I messed up a repair I'd done 100 times before. My supervisor noticed. I apologized again. That was becoming a habit. I started wondering if the problem wasn't the dinner at all, but the quiet resentment I'd been swallowing for months, hoping it would dissolve on its own. The days after the dinner felt heavier, like I was carrying something no one else could see. Sarah went back to her routine. Early mornings, polished clothes, late evenings, but something had shifted. She was polite, careful, like she didn't want to set off another misunderstanding. I started pulling back without meaning to. I ate less, slept worse. At night, the apartment filled with small sounds, the buzz of the fridge, the traffic outside. That made my thoughts louder. I kept replaying her words. "You embarrass me." I wondered when I'd become someone she felt she needed distance from. At work, the guys joked about overtime and vacations I couldn't afford. One asked if I was keeping up with my wife now that she was corporate. I laughed, but it landed like a punch. The idea that other people might see me as the weak link settled into my chest. Money didn't help. A surprise medical bill arrived. I hid it in a drawer instead of telling Sarah, ashamed that I couldn't handle it on my own. We argued over nothing, dirty dishes, missed calls, tone. Each fight ended unresolved, both of us retreating to opposite corners. I started questioning everything. My value. My place in her life. Whether love could quietly outgrow one person while the other stood still, trying to keep up. One night, Sarah came home later than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights off, staring at my phone without seeing anything. When she walked in, she paused, like she hadn't expected me to be there waiting. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked. "I didn't want to wake you," I said, though that wasn't the truth. The truth was I didn't know how to talk to her anymore without sounding insecure. She mentioned another upcoming work event. "Not a dinner, just drinks." "It's optional," she added quickly, watching my face. That made my stomach drop. Optional meant I wasn't invited again. Optional meant she was choosing distance, even if she didn't say it out loud. I nodded and said it was fine. After she went to shower, I sat there listening to the water run, feeling something between anger and grief. I hated that I was becoming this version of myself. Suspicious, quiet, shrinking. Later, in bed, I tried to reach for her. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. That hesitation said more than words ever could. Lying there in the dark, I realized I wasn't just afraid of losing her. I was afraid that, little by little, I was losing myself, and no one seemed to notice but me. The tension followed us everywhere, even when nothing was said. We moved around each other like roommates afraid of starting a fight. Mornings were quiet. Evenings were quieter. I started staying later at work, not because I was needed, but because the apartment felt too small for everything I was thinking. One afternoon, I overheard two coworkers talking about their wives, how proud they were, how supportive. I kept my head down, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. Pride felt complicated now. Support felt conditional. I wondered if Sarah saw me as a burden she'd outgrown. At home, she talked about deadlines and office politics. I nodded, asked the right questions, tried to be the version of myself she needed. Inside, I was keeping score of everything I wasn't saying. The resentment scared me. It didn't feel loud or explosive. It felt quiet and heavy, like it could sink us without warning. We finally argued over something small, me forgetting to take out the trash. She snapped. I snapped back. Words spilled out sharper than intended. She accused me of being distant. I accused her of shutting me out. Neither of us won. That night, I slept on the couch again. The fabric smelled faintly like detergent and old coffee. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly, thinking about that dinner, about how out of place I'd felt, and how I hadn't felt back in place since. By the end of that week, I felt wrung out. Not angry enough to explode. Not hopeful enough to try harder. Just exhausted. I went through the motions. Work, eat, sleep. But everything felt muted, like I was watching my own life from a distance. One night, I sat alone on the balcony, the city humming below, cool air pressing against my face. Sarah was inside on her phone, laughing softly at something I wasn't part of. I didn't feel jealous anymore. I felt empty. That's when the realization crept in. Not dramatic, not inspiring. Just honest. I couldn't keep living like this, quietly resenting her and hating myself for it. Avoiding the issue hadn't protected our marriage. It had only worn me down. The thought scared me, because I didn't know what changing anything would cost. What if speaking up pushed her further away? What if staying silent erased me completely? I didn't make a plan. I didn't feel brave. I just understood that something had to shift, even if I didn't know how. Sitting there in the half-light, listening to traffic and distant voices, I felt the pressure reach its limit. Not a breaking point, just a moment of clarity that I couldn't unsee anymore. The turning point didn't arrive with confidence. It came with nerves and a tight chest that wouldn't ease up. The next morning, I woke before my alarm and lay there staring at the ceiling, knowing I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Avoiding the truth had become its own kind of risk. I spent the day mentally preparing. At work, I moved slowly, carefully, like I was conserving energy for something bigger waiting at home. I kept rehearsing what I wanted to say, then stopping myself. I didn't want to accuse her. I didn't want to beg. I just wanted to be honest without falling apart. That evening, I asked Sarah if we could talk. No phones, no distractions. She looked wary but agreed. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same place where we'd eaten so many quiet dinners lately. I told her how small I'd felt at the work dinner, how disconnected I'd been feeling ever since, how scared I was of becoming invisible in her life. My voice shook, and I didn't hide it. She listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. That scared me almost as much as anger would have. I didn't know where this conversation would lead, toward understanding or further distance. But for the first time, I wasn't running from the fear. I was choosing to face it, even without knowing the outcome.